Welcome everyone to our second in a series of webinars we're broadcasting this year. This one is entitled Renewables Now, and we're happy to bring everyone together. We have organizers here from Food and Water Watch to talk about how we can move our nation, our states, and our communities off of fossil fuels. They have so much to share with you tonight, and we want to get into it, but before we get started, we wanted to take a moment first to say thank you to all of you. These webinars, all the work we do at Food and Water Watch doesn't happen without your support. And from all of us at Food and Water Watch, we are so grateful for all that you do to enable everything to happen at our organization. And these webinars are designed for you. They're exclusive to our most loyal supporters at Food and Water Watch, and that is all of you. You make this work possible, and we thank you. My name is Joe Alfano. I am the Director of Individual Giving here at Food and Water Watch, and I will be your host for the webinar tonight. Again, the topic is Renewables Now, and it's a really critical topic. Climate change is one of the most critical issues facing our society today. And we're so reliant on fossil fuels, principally oil, gas, and coal to power our homes, our businesses, and our transportation. And this is leading to increasing climate change issues and intensifying in climate disaster. This problem has two solutions. One, we could continue down the current path and face increasing wildfires, floods, droughts, intense hurricanes, and other public and environmental health impacts. Or we can turn down a better road toward a renewable future, one where clean, carbon-free solar, wind, and geothermal sources provide us with all the energy we need to maintain our current lifestyle while protecting the planet. And given these consequences, I think that the choice we must make is very clear. I've been involved with environmental groups for most of my career, and I had a real telling moment back in 2013. I was down in New Orleans at the Lafitte Historic Park and was on a tour with one of the rangers, and the ranger seemed kind of down, and we were pressing him on questions about the location, and he revealed that he felt that with climate change and what was happening to our Earth, that the park that he loved and had worked at all his life would be underwater within the next 10 to 15 years. And that really hit home to me, that these beautiful places that we love are the places that we live are so in danger from the threat of climate change, and we must do something. And Food and Water Watch is an organization that is doing something. With me tonight is Andrea Leon Grossman, our Southern California organizer, Jim Walsh, our Renewable Energy Policy Analyst, and joining from our Oakland office is Mark Schlossberg, our National Organizing Co-Director. And I believe I forgot to mention that the three of us here are in our Los Angeles office at Food and Water Watch. Mark is going to kick off our presentation tonight in a couple minutes, but before we do that, I wanted to mention a few things. We do have a question and answer tonight. So at any time, if you have a question, you can click the Q&A button on your screen, and that will allow you to submit questions. Towards the end of tonight's webinar, we will have an opportunity to go ahead and answer some of those questions. We encourage all of you to participate, and we'll do our best to get through as many questions as possible. So I'm excited to turn our conversation over to Jim, Mark, and Andrea, and we're going to send it up to Oakland and start off with Mark Schlossberg.
Thanks, Joe, and good to be here with you all. We are really in the fight of our lives right now in dealing with the major issue of climate change. As a father of two teenage boys, I worry increasingly as I see study after study talking about the impacts that climate change is going to have on our food, on our water, on the livability of our planet, about their future and the future of their friends and future generations. The science is becoming abundantly clear, not only that we need to act on climate, but we need to do it right now. We don't have time to wait. We need to move off of fossil fuels immediately. We really have the next decade is critical to doing this. And we don't have a choice. We're in this fight together and we have to win. Food and Water Watch, a lot of people ask why we're involved in climate issues. And that's because there's no bigger threat right now to our food and our water than the overarching issue of climate change. Additionally, there are things that we're doing with our food and our water right now that are impacting the climate. For example, fracking. We got involved with fracking out of concern initially around groundwater, but that's a very intensive form of energy production that's really supercharging climate change. Same with factory farms on the food side. So we see these issues of food, water, and climate change as inextricably related, and we need to address them in a holistic way, and we need to move off of fossil fuels immediately to address many of these concerns. At Food and Water Watch, we believe very strongly that we need to follow the science and advocate for the bold solutions that will actually address the major problems that we're facing. We do not have time for half measures that are not really going to affect the problem, because the problem will continue whether or not we get a policy implemented. So we've really approached things by taking a bold, science-based approach, really advocating for what we need to do to address a problem, and then organizing community by community, neighborhood by neighborhood, legislative district by legislative district to get those policies passed and to really change public opinion to the point that we're able to win real improvements in people's lives. And I think the fracking fight is a good example of how we did that. When we first came out for a national ban on fracking as the first national group to do that, we followed the lead of the science and our grassroots partners in calling for a ban at a time when that really wasn't the popular position to be taking. And we organized across the state of New York and across the country, community by community, building a broad coalition with our partners, and we were able to ban fracking in New York. We were also able to ban fracking in Maryland, in hundreds of communities across the country. Here in California, we banned fracking in several counties, including Monterey County and San Benito County at the ballot. And in the course of doing all this organizing, we're changing public opinion. Now, there's no longer consensus that fracked gas should be part of a bridge to the future energy policy. In fact, it's looked at more of like a gangplank towards climate chaos. And we're doing more and more of that important work. And you can see this. In fact, a poll just came out yesterday from Pew that showed 58% of Americans now across all different aspects are opposed to increased fracking. And that's very different than the way the situation was 4, 5, 6 years ago. So we know that through organizing, we can win real changes and we can change public opinion in the process. And we know we need to do this on climate as well. We need to move off of fossil fuels. We first called for moving to 100% renewable energy by 2035 and 2015. Now we have the Conference of Mayors saying we need to do the same thing. We've seen legislation that we've organized to get introduced in New York, New Jersey, Maryland, and Virginia to get off fossil fuels by 2035 or 2030 in New York. And we've seen federal legislation that we worked with Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard to get introduced, the Off Fossil Fuels for Better Future Act, which would move the entire country to 100% renewable energy by 2035. It now has 33 co-sponsors in Congress. And again, just like we did with fracking, we're organizing community by community, district by district, and moving more and more members onto this important legislation. But of course, we can't just do things at the state level. We can't just do things at the federal level. We need to do things at the local level as well. And that's why we focused on Los Angeles, the city that has been built on transportation, the automobile. We're going to move Los Angeles to 100% renewable energy, and we have a plan to do it. I'm very excited about this. We focused on Los Angeles because it represents the political power, a big political power base in California. California is an important state, and often policies in California end up reverberating across the country. We've got a great team of organizers that's been working for years in Southern California with other community partners, and we have a public utility that we can work to move that's accountable to the people. So we're going to do this. We're going to move off of fossil fuels nationally to 100% by 2035. We're going to go in Los Angeles, and we're going to make Los Angeles 100% renewable, fossil fuel free by 2030. I'm very excited about this work. You'll hear more about the details from Jim and Andrea, but this is how we're going to really move this issue nationally, community by community, and Los Angeles is really an epicenter for this. So with that introduction, I'll turn you over to Jim so you can hear a little bit more about this work.
Great, thank you very much. And I would like to also just offer my thanks to all of you out there who support our work at Food and Water Watch. I look at it as a privilege to work for this organization because we are really at the forefront of pushing for important policies that are going to bring concrete changes to people's lives. When we look at the issue of climate change and moving towards 100% renewable energy by 2035, we came out with that goal because the science said it needed to be done. We didn't come out with that goal because we said this is where the politics are today. And I'm very proud to work for an organization that prioritizes a vision for the world we need and not the one that's politically viable today. And this report that we conducted with Synapse Energy Economics on Los Angeles was done to work to help shape that vision for the world we need. And we work with them to produce a study on how Los Angeles can transition to 100% renewable electricity by 2030. In this study, we established a baseline based on LADWP's Integrated Resource Plan, which I'll refer to generically as IRP in this presentation. We created 2 case models that look at pathways to 100% renewable electricity. One is the utility scale model, which creates a transition that relies very heavily on large scale utility solar projects. And another is a distributed model, which relies more heavily on distributed rooftop solar projects. Now, there are a few major takeaways from this study that are really important to mention. And one is 100% renewable is possible for LA, but it's not just possible, it's possible with no net cost to the system. And what's also important is it doesn't require a substantial departure from the reference case, essentially what LADWP is planning on doing anyways over the next few years. And this will give LADWP time to adequately plan and prepare for the steps that are necessary to make this transition to 100% renewable energy quickly and sustainably. And the other major takeaway that's really important for this, and actually surprised all of us when we did this study, is we found that storage, energy efficiency, and demand response are actually key to this transition happening in a way that's affordable. And in the scenarios that we created, the transition actually relies on about the same amount of renewable energy as LADWP is planning on developing anyways, but really just improves the energy grid and how we use that energy to reach 100% renewable energy goal. Now, when we looked at the feasibility of this study, we decided to choose LA because of what Mark said is absolutely right. The LA is the epicenter of power in California in many ways, and California is a leader in the country. There's also some local dynamics which are really important to recognize. Mayor Garcetti has an ambition to put big policies forward for a sustainable Los Angeles. Now, those policy goals aren't necessarily in line with 100% renewable energy. And we want to make this move to 100% renewable energy the big plans that the mayor is looking to initiate. LADWP is also a very large utility. It actually serves a load that's higher, that's more than 13 entire states, which gives us an example of how this can be done on a larger scale. Many smaller municipalities are making these steps to transition towards 100% renewable energy, but this is a really large utility base that can make this transition happen. There are also policies in California which are setting us on the right path to 100% renewable energy. They don't go far enough, but they do start in that direction. And that's a law in California that requires 80% of emissions below 1990 levels by 2050, and another law that currently requires the state to reach 50% renewable energy by 2030. Now, while it's more ambitious than other states, it does not go far enough. And the LADWP City Council actually directed LADWP to look at a procedure to move towards 100% renewable energy. And LADWP is frankly moving very slowly in that process. And Andrea is going to talk a little bit more about that as we go forward. Now, And so it's important to recognize that this study shows that we can do it, and we can do it at no additional cost. Now, LADWP's existing generation really relies heavily on coal, actually more relative to the rest of the state of California. In 2016, though, LADWP's Board of Water and Power approved a contract that will enable the utility to completely transition off coal by 2025. And that's LADWP's current plan. Now, we will still have, under that current plan, a significant amount of gas and a significant amount of nuclear energy in that mix. There's also in LA tremendous potential to utilize energy efficiency to bring down cost. This energy efficiency and also demand response will help to ease the transition to 100% renewable energy. Energy efficiency is important because right now 4% of the buildings in LA consume 50% of LADWP's energy. This means that intelligent, cost-effective programs at those buildings could lead to significant changes and savings for the system. And right now, LADWP has about 1.2% per year in savings from energy efficiency programs. Our study actually makes the assumption that those numbers will move towards 3% savings per year as of 2024. And this is easily doable in LA because of the concentration of energy use, but leading utilities across the country are already meeting those goals right now. Now, meeting that 100% renewable trajectory requires action beyond our current plans. And here you can see how our utility scale model will is different than the utility scale, or the base scale that LADWP is currently planning on conducting. Now, LADWP uses about 1,200 megawatts of pumped storage and about 12 megawatts of small scale thermal and battery storage. In both our reference case, which assumes LADWP's current trajectory, and our both of our alternative cases include moving to 404 megawatts of battery storage by 2025, as LADWP is planning on doing in their 2016 IRP. Now, the plan also assumes that LADWP will retire all their gas units by 2030. Now, we don't have those gas units all turning off in 2030, but we actually gradually phase out those gas plants as additional storage comes online in our alternative case models. As I mentioned earlier, these models developed are pretty similar up front, but as DWP starts making the transition to renewables, there's significant changes in that. So where LADWP has a current target of between 900 and 1,500 megawatts of solar by 2025, the distributed case model actually estimates that we would use about 6 gigawatts of solar capacity with over 4 gigawatts of distributed solar capacity. The utility scale model builds about 3.6 gigawatts of solar capacity, with the majority, 2.2 gigawatts, being of utility scale, which is a significantly more renewables or solar than LADWP. And right now, LADWP is on pace to build about 155 megawatts of storage by 2021. Our model assumes about 2 gigawatts of storage capacity by 2030. Now, when we do this transition, it's really important that we talk about what we mean by renewable energy. Right now, LA and California, when they talk about renewable energy at the state and municipal level, they're talking about a variety of energy sources that include things that we like solar and wind, but they also include dirty energy sources like biogas and municipal solid waste conversion. We don't like these energy sources because they, frankly, depend on, they incentivize waste and unsustainable practices like factory farming. They emit greenhouse gases and generate other pollutants that impact public health and the environment. Our study only relies on clean renewable energy from wind and solar and geothermal sources to get LA to 100% renewable. Now, this picture actually shows you that in order to achieve 100% renewable energy in every hour of the year, we must have a way to meet demand on a peak day. And this is what energy usage and generation looks like on a peak day in 2030. And you can see that storage actually collects energy during the day and then uses that energy later in the day to meet peak demand, which is that black line going forward. And so this is, really just gives you a picture of how this increase in storage actually would provide for the needed energy for people in Los Angeles on a consistent basis. This graph actually demonstrates that the shift to solar to meet energy demand can be done for a lower net cost than staying on fossil fuels. And this doesn't, the important part about this is this just looks at the cost from an LADWP perspective of providing the energy. It doesn't actually consider any of the cost associated with the healthcare costs from burning fossil fuels or the impacts of climate change on communities. We expect that the cost will realize further savings down the road because LADWP will not need to purchase solar, or they will not need to purchase gas and coal as they after 2030 as energy inputs as they would for fossil fuels. And so with that, I will turn this over to Andrea, who's going to talk a little bit about moving LA to 100% renewable and how we get there, politics and all.
Thank you, Jim.
Thank you.
Well, the reason I got involved into 100% renewables and this campaign was because I want to be part of the solution. I see what dirty energy can do, and most recently what it did to my family in Mexico City. My cousin died waiting to be rescued in a crumbled building because rescuers couldn't get to him because of all the gas leaks. So I understand that fossil fuels can kill us in more ways than we can think about. And again, I want to be part of the solution. I want to make sure that we have energy that doesn't hurt us or kill us. So we can be part of the solution. We can have politicians be part of the solution, and we can all be part of the solution. So with that, let me start by telling you how LADWP has 4 power plants right now in Basin, and 3 of them are coastal power plants that have some units that need to be rebuilt, and they call that repowering. And the screen that you're looking at right now, those are Scattergood, Harbor, and Haines. Scattergood is right next to LAX. Harbor is by the port, and Haines is in Long Beach. The Valley Generation plant is in the valley. It's actually close to Porter Ranch, where we had the big blowout. The next slide, that is Scattergood. So that was a picture of Scattergood. Again, this is the next power plant that we have that LADWP wants to repower, and they're analyzing how they're going to repower or rebuild these 2 units. We are going to be showing up and asking the commissioners and the executives and the city council to rebuild that with renewable energy. We cannot afford to keep building new fossil fuel infrastructure. It's not reasonable if we cannot afford to keep fracking and keep pumping that gas into our city and burning that gas in our city. Besides that, we have built and overbuilt gas infrastructure and power plants overall to the point that we just have too much energy. Some power plants are just operating at 10 or 15%. So it's time to start shutting down the gas power plants that we don't need and relying on renewable energy. Again, one of the quotes that Jim just quoted was that 4% of the buildings in LA are using 50% of the energy, and that's just obscene. We really need to focus on using the energy that we need and nothing more. The cheapest megawatt or kilowatt that we have is the one that is never used or never built. Besides that, the same energy or the same buildings are using or misusing that energy are also misusing water. And right now in California, the biggest use of energy is to move water, and that's water from up north, and that's 19% of all the energy is used to move water. So if we go to those buildings and make sure that they're efficient in terms of energy and in terms of water, the savings can be tremendous. We do have fact sheets in terms of how much savings we can have by rebuilding these power plants with renewable energy. And at this point, it's actually cheaper to rebuild them with renewable energy in terms of solar and battery storage instead of having gas. So we will be pushing as an organization and as a community to make sure that the City Council and the Board of Commissioners look at repowering the coastal power plants with renewable energy. There's a mandate right now to make sure that they comply with once-through cooling, and that means that these power plants can no longer be using ocean water to cool turbines. So that's why these power plants are being rebuilt. So again, we're going to be pushing to make sure that this money is allocated responsibly. One really exciting thing that came out of the Synapse report was that we had lobby visits and we explained the Synapse report and how we can actually get off fossil fuels in a sensible way and an affordable way. That Councilmember Bonin and Koretz introduced a motion to DWP so that they can study 100% renewables for their IRP. That's the Integrated Resource Plan. That's a 20-year plan, and that's with our definition of renewable energy. That means solar, that means wind, geothermal, energy efficiency, and demand response. Nothing else. No dirty energy, no biomass, no biogas. So again, our goal is to stop the repowering, shut down the existing units eventually, and we usually have a great turnout from our volunteers in our community. We use all the tools that we have at our disposal, whether it's phone banking, whether it's community meetings, to make sure that the politicians do the right thing and the responsible thing. So right now, the decision makers are the City Council, Mayor Garcetti, and of course, the commissioners. Another exciting part of our campaign, and we already have 2 major wins, are to electrify transportation. So the first major win that we had was with the LA County. We won that campaign in coalition with other labor organizations and green organizations, and that was to move all the buses from the county to be 100% electric by 2030. And that means cleaner air for everyone, and those buses are also going to be powered with 100% clean energy. The second win was with the City of LA, and that's, again, more electric buses by 2030, and all those buses are also going to be powered with clean renewable energy. And again, thank you so much. It's really exciting to be part of the solution, and it's great to be here, and thank you so much.
Great, thanks, Andrea. So I think we have some time for a few questions. We've got about 10 minutes to go. So if there's any questions out there, we will read them off and get a few through here. One is that is the LA campaign replicable elsewhere? Jim, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, so we're actually, not only is it replicable elsewhere, but right now it's a key opportunity for people to be organizing in their municipalities and communities to move towards 100% renewable. You know, we know in the White House right now, we have a climate denier. At the head of EPA, we have a climate denier, and they are doing things to help stop the transition to renewable energy. But the reality is most of the energy decisions are actually left up to the states. And so they can do things to put their thumb on the scale, but where the rubber meets the road is with state and municipal governments. And municipalities and local communities and state governments have a lot of power to actually start implementing plans to move towards 100% renewable energy. There's right now over 100 communities in the country that have developed some sort of plan to make that transition to clean renewable energy. And folks should get involved with Food and Water Watch organizers in your communities and elsewhere to help make sure that this transition happens.
Yeah, I just want to add to that. None of these things are going to be possible without involving thousands of people across the country. LA, we're going to win because we're going to engage a broad cross-section of the community, and we're going to engage thousands of people to be talking to their members of city council, to be organizing their communities, to be turning out to city council meetings, going to community forums, and that's how we're going to build the political power that's needed to win. That's how we did the ban on fracking in Maryland. That's how we were able to pass a ban on fracking in Monterey County in California, et cetera. It's by organizing in the community. So we really need you all to help be engaged in that process along with thousands of other people across the country. Yes, LA we can win in LA and we can replicate that across the country. As Jim mentioned, we can also win these fights at the state level, and ultimately we need to win this fight at the national level. And there's another way that you can get engaged. You see these signs behind me. See this, renewables to 69866. If you text that word to that number, which is going to be up here the rest of this webinar, you can have time to write it down. That will allow you to get engaged, to call your member, get in touch with your member of Congress, to sign on to the Off Fossil Fuels Act and get more engaged in some of those programs as well.
Great, thanks, Mark. So another question here, an interesting one. This person asked, they said, I live in a conservative state and not much is being done to address climate change. What can I do in my community to support efforts like this?
That's a great question. One is, I don't believe that there's any part of the country that we shouldn't be organizing in. We need to talk to people, even in the most conservative areas, maybe where a lot of your friends and neighbors are not necessarily agreeing with what you think needs to happen, what really does need to happen on climate. We need to educate and we need to organize everywhere. However, we also have a program, our Off Fossil Fuels program, where you can get engaged to help out on some very pressing fights from wherever you are in the country. You can make phone calls, say like the campaign in Los Angeles, for example. If you're in another state and want to help Los Angeles go to 100% renewable energy because you want to see it set a precedent for the rest of the country, you can get involved in our Off Fossil Fuels program. Our organizers will help you get trained on how to do phone calls from your home into our supporters and members in Los Angeles and ask them to call their member of city council, or to send text messages to people in Los Angeles or elsewhere in the country where there's a key pressing fight happening, to get them to weigh in on how they can get involved in LA City Council. So there's lots of options, lots of ways to get involved. So you can get in touch with us and we will help you get plugged into that program.
Yeah, I would just add to that, even in a conservative community, there are reasons to support these policies. And from a conservative perspective, and first and foremost, this report shows us that the transition to renewable energy can actually be more affordable than staying on dirty, polluting fossil fuels. So where you may have an elected official who flatly denies climate change, they cannot deny the fact that the cost of transitioning to renewable energy is becoming cheaper and cheaper every day.
Great. I think this next one is for Andrea. The person asks, can you tell me what a typical day or work week entails to make the goals you have for the renewable energy program? And in your role, what do you do on a given work week to that end?
Well, there's a variety of things, and it depends on what work week, but mostly there's a fair amount of meetings, and there's strategy meetings, because there's different strategies and tactics that we use and that we have to consider. There's often a few lobby visits, whether it's city hall or even state meetings, or it could be even federal meetings. My member of Congress, Karen Bass, actually endorsed the OFF Act, which is really exciting. And there might be a town hall that I end up attending. And it's really also exciting to meet other members of my community so that they can also get involved. And it's just exciting to get more people to get them to know what is at stake. And a lot of people get excited to be part of Food and Water Watch. There's a lot of tools that we learn how to use, whether it's Coalfire, which is the tool that we use for phone banking, or Relay, which is something that we use for texting. And it's just, again, it's just something new every day that we use to get people involved and to get lawmakers also to do the right thing. So it's a variety of things, and I think it's always something new. So it's great.
Great. I speak from personal experience. You don't want to be on the wrong side of Andrea. She's a tough one. She's a great organizer and a tough cookie. So next one, I think maybe for Jim. Says the person asks, I've heard that battery storage is not viable. What has changed with the technology that makes you believe we can use this today?
Yeah, it's not just me who believes that we can use this today. In California, the Public Utility Commission has actually ordered utilities to shut down plans to build out gas plants and replace that with storage. Utilities are making similar decisions because the costs are coming down. I think one thing that all of us, for better or worse, can appreciate is that we have these little boxes in our pockets that we're able to walk around, which have tremendous amounts of computing power, right? And the battery technology in those we've seen improve dramatically, right, over the years. That same sort of technological advancement is happening in large-scale, utility-scale solar or energy storage, and that's really the key to helping to make sure that we can reach that renewable energy goal. In Los Angeles and elsewhere, because you can store that excess energy with renewables when the sun is shining, and then use it later on down the road. And so we're seeing that policymakers are actually making these decisions around utilizing batteries instead of gas-fired power plants to meet peak demand, and we're going to continue to see that happen as we move into the future.
Great, thanks, Jim. I love this next question. Maybe throw it out to all three of you. The person wants to know, how do you stay positive and determined when the task is so daunting?
Well, I'll just take this first. I don't really see us as having a choice. I mean, we're really in a critical fight of our lives, and we have to win. We don't have a choice. And I guess I draw a lot of hope and inspiration from the incredible activists that are involved in pushing these programs forward and the wins that we see happen. We saw Governor Cuomo just last week tell one of our organizers at an event that he was not going to approve any new gas power plants in New York. We saw a pipeline be delayed for long periods of time. We've seen local communities organize against huge odds and win bans on fracking in California and elsewhere against being tremendously outspent. So we know that when we all work together, when we build strong coalitions, working with our grassroots partners and allies, when we involve thousands of people, that we can win. So we don't really have a choice. We have to be in this fight because our lives literally and the survival of the planet literally depends on us making this transition. And we know that when people organize together, when we band together and go community by community, district by district, and put pressure on our elected officials to a large enough extent that we can win. We're in a horrific political time right now. Everybody can see what's happening, and it's really, really challenging and can be quite depressing. But we can also see really exciting things that are happening at the local level and at the state level, where people are organizing, fighting back, and winning real changes that are going to have a significant impact on the climate. So that's what keeps me going. And I'm excited that you all are in this fight with us. And together, I think we can really achieve some of these very significant things.
Andrea?
Yeah, I would second Mark on that. I worked on that campaign in Monterey to ban fracking, and it was one of the most intense 2 weeks of my life, and I don't regret any second of it. It was absolutely awesome. It was the election in 2016, so talk about mixed emotions. But seriously, I mean, that win was epic. It was we were outspent almost 30-1, and that demonstrates the power of organizing. Again, it's just it's people power, and again, like Mark said, we don't have a choice. I mean, we need we're in the fight of our lives, and what's the alternative?
Yeah.
I think for me, one of the things that keeps me going is trying to take a really big picture perspective. You know, I look at the work we're doing as building off of the work that people have been doing for generations in this country and around the world to build a more just and equitable society. And, you know, I think back to, you know, the struggles that people were fighting during the civil rights movement, right? Where people were being beaten for sitting at lunch counters. Or going back even further to that, to what it must have been like to be somebody who was fighting slavery in the early 1800s. That must have been one of the darkest times to be organizing, with the tremendous human rights abuses that were happening and no light at the end of the tunnel for when that would happen. And people continued to struggle and fight, and things got better, and they won victories, and they won changes. And so in doing this work, we need to put it in perspective that we are moving towards a broader goal. And some of the things that we're fighting for, we may not see in our lifetimes. Some of the things that we're fighting for, we need to see in our lifetimes. We need to see this transition to 100% renewable energy. And there are a lot of victories that are happening all over the place that are making that possible. So don't just look at the flavor of the day. Don't just, you know, look at what's coming across the television to expect to give you hope. You know, look at historically how social movements have built power and use that power to effectuate change, and how we're going to build power to effectuate change, and how future generations are going to be able to use that. Thank you.
Thanks, Jim. So we have time for just a couple more questions. One here, person's asking if there's other organizations we're working with, either locally or nationally, to achieve the goal. How do we work together? How do we share information? And how that would help us to achieve those clean energy goals?
Well, we do work on coalitions, like, for instance, a great example is the Electric Bus Coalition, and that was different organizations from labor and from green organizations, and that was a great way to organize, because again, this green energy revolution is not only about just a switch to clean energy and renewables, but it's also what's going to happen with the jobs right now in the dirty energy sector. So you have to think about a fast and just transition to clean renewable energy. You need to make sure that there's good green jobs for people to be had. And that was a great way to go and put even more pressure on legislators to do the right thing, and they did. And it was, I mean, it was hands down. The gas company had really no way to win that one, and that was because we did a great job aligning with labor, and that's what we need to do to make sure that we win with LADWP and with any other battle. So again, you need allies. We need everyone to change everything. So.
Yeah, some of the really critical partners on the Off Fossil Fuels Act, for example, of ours have been Progressive Democrats of America, National Nurses United, People's Action, and others. But I do want to say that one of the things that I really I think is great about Food and Water Watch and our organizing approach is that we've invested a lot of our resources, a lot of time and energy into really building out real coalitions with a lot of local grassroots community partners and organizations to, you know, so that we can lift ourselves up together and combine the power of all these smaller organizations, some statewide groups, some national groups, but a lot of the local groups together into a more powerful political force. I think we did that most effectively and most notably in New York when we all came together to ban fracking, but we've also continued to do that other places like in Maryland, in California, in Pennsylvania, and elsewhere. So we really, you know, we know that, you know, Food and Water Watch, we have a lot of resources as a national organization. We have a research team. A lot of grassroots groups don't have a research team, so we can lend some of that support to help boost a local campaign. We have communication staff that we sometimes use to help build out a coalition effort. We see ourselves as being an important leader as a national organization and in helping to build out these coalitions that can really be stronger than each of the individual organizations to make more powerful movement.
Great, thank you, Mark. And these have been terrific questions. Thank you all. We really appreciate everything that you've sent over to us tonight. But we unfortunately are coming up on our time. We want to be respectful of your time, so we're going to wrap up now. Big thanks to Andrea, Jim, and Mark for joining us tonight and for sharing everything with us. Our next webinar, the third one in the series, will be coming up on September 25th, and it will be Factory Farms, the Case for a Ban. And if you'd like to learn more about that, you can go to our website, foodandwaterwatch.org. We released just yesterday our report on banning a case to ban factory farms. You can read more about that now. And also, we'd love your feedback. So please reach out to us, share with us your thoughts on this webinar or any other thing we're doing here at Food and Water Watch. You can email us at champion@foodandfwwatch.org. That is champion@fwwatch.org, and we will be sure to get right back to you. Thank you again for joining us. We appreciate all of your support and everything you do for us, and we hope to speak with you all soon. Have a great evening.